everyone. I'm sorry about the delay this morning. It looks like we have a good group of 8 people. I think this is our largest group ever, and we should have an interesting discussion today. Okie dokie. Let's see, we have Johnny, who's in Finland.
Yeah, hi, everybody.
I'm in Southern California. Ernest, where are you from?
Washington.
Yeah, that's it.
Where?
Thank you.
Where are you from? Ernie, where are you?
Oh, yeah, no. So I'm in nearby Washington in Annapolis, Maryland, and I'm originally from Detroit, Michigan. So the Lions are making history right now. They're actually winning games.
Okay, we have Dave Clark, who's in Florida. Richard Acosta, you haven't been with us before. Where are you?
I'm in New Jersey, but I teach in New York and New Jersey.
Okay, and Ace, who's in the Philippines, and Darren, who's in New Orleans, and Eric, who's in the sagacious San Fernando Valley, Southern California as well. Anyway, okay. Our first topic today is going to be an interesting. It's Kodokan Judo versus Jiu-Jitsu. Now, I don't know whose topic this is, or if anyone wants to claim responsibility for it. But it's, let me just go through it, then we can just, there are a lot of comments here. It's widely accepted and acknowledged that jiu-jitsu is more complete and more deadly than judo. Judo is intended to be safer and more limited than jiu-jitsu. Judo is designed to be a sport. Why then was the Kodokan able to defeat all the existing styles of jiu-jitsu consistently? Is it superior training, better philosophies, curation of the techniques to a more focused set, the curricular approach to material instead of a haphazard teaching and methodology? Was it that jiu-jitsu practitioners shouldn't have safe versions of techniques, so they couldn't use them competitively without maiming or killing? That's a whole other issue in itself. Was it that jiu-jitsu schools typically did not emphasize ukemi, whereas judo does? Anyway, anyone want to start this conversation? Oh, come on now.
I can go ahead and start with that one.
Pardon?
I can go ahead and start with that one.
Hey, go for it, Eric.
Sure. So I myself practice judo, and I will be the first to say that judo is what helped me to really speed up my jiu-jitsu journey. I'm not going to say it is superior. See, what judo does, this is coming from the creator of judo, Jigaro Kano, and he was a jiu-jitsu practitioner. He saw that the in jiu-jitsu, when you are sparring, like live sparring, people get hurt all the time. So he wanted to create a safer way to do live sparring. Judo came about, but judo is still a part of jiu-jitsu. It takes away the dangerous components like wrist locks and weapons and strikes. If anything, if you look at the kata of judo, they still have strikes in it. They still have weapon defense in it. It's an older way that's being taught, but it's still there. Now in judo, this is when I was going in. I haven't been there in a year due to a shoulder injury, but we would start with conditioning. 30 minutes of just straight sport conditioning, and then we would go over learning the technique of the day, or maybe 2 or 3 throws, and then that can go on for the next half hour. Then the next half hour, it can be a 2-hour class. The next half hour, it would be another technique, and we're doing drills and so on. And then we have randori. Randori is usually, it's not supposed to be we're going to be winning. Is you're applying these techniques against a fully resisting opponent, and it's great for jiu-jitsu because you are applying these techniques, throws and locks to a fully resisting opponent, and in a safe manner. And when you apply these techniques against a fully resisting opponent, it's teaching you how to apply these techniques. You have an easier time with it. Versus if you try doing that to somebody out in the street and you never threw anybody that was resisting, you will find that it is extremely difficult to do that. People have been training all their lives not to fall. So when you can throw a fully resisting opponent over and over and over, that's one of the great benefits of judo with the randori is I can throw someone that's been training in judo, and he's trying to throw me as well. So I am learning how to defend myself, and I'm learning how to throw a fully resisting opponent.
Okay. What's going on here again? I've lost gallery immersive. This is not fair. My computer is not playing fair with me today. Speaker, you. Okay, now I'm back to what I had before. Gallery. Okay, we're back. Okay. Okay, so what you're essentially saying is that your judo background provides you, because you're working against fully resistant people, provides you with the training to more effectively throw a person on the street if using jiu-jitsu, because you know what kind of resistance you may be running into. You're capable of compensating for it, and the throw will work. And who has the cat?
I've got no pet.
Yeah,
Okay, Tony.
The cat wants to speak.
The cat wants to say something.
It's like you're all wrong.
Cat wants to say something. It doesn't want to be catatonic. Anyway.
So yes, judo has helped me tremendously in learning the techniques of jiu-jitsu, at the very least the throwing techniques in jiu-jitsu, and it's I can throw someone in different directions due to the nature of judo. In judo, you have forward throws, you have back, you have sideways, even diagonal, and that does help me with jiu-jitsu. On top of my various other backgrounds in martial arts like karate, but I would say judo is what helped me the most with jiu-jitsu.
Okay. Yeah, how do you say it? I know that judo was taken, we all know that judo was taken from jujitsu by Jigaro Kano to create a safe physical activity that would ultimately find its way into the Japanese school curriculum, which it did.
Right, it was originally for education.
Right,
Not
right.
sport.
Originally for, yeah, and to build, self-confidence and coordination and all these other proper concepts. So I guess the question, we're saying judo versus jujitsu, is one superior to the other, or is it that they have different goals and purposes?
If you're talking about like I said originally, it's not superior to the other. Judo is jujitsu. I mean, it's a part of it. So it's not fair to say it is superior. It's the goals are different. In judo, it's a lot of judo that is practiced today is more sport, especially if you look at the Olympics. And as a matter of fact, what is widely known is if you want to be successful in the sport of judo, you typically would learn about 3 to 5 techniques, and you specialize in those techniques. You don't learn the whole curriculum of it. I mean, yeah, sure, you have the foot sweeps and whatnot, and you have to know how to defend against certain throws, but you specialize in a certain number of throws. That's in the sport of jiu-jitsu. In that's in the sport of judo. Sorry. In self-defense, I'm just going off of your Densho book, Sensei Kirby, that you have over 800 techniques, right? And you need to be able to learn and apply those techniques, and that can take a very long time. And so not only do we have the time aspect, you also have the live training against a fully resisting opponent, and it's really the training methodology that is really helpful in learning judo. Is being able to fully resist, throw a fully resisting opponent onto the ground, pin him, submit him, or choke him out, and that did transfer over to jiu-jitsu.
Right.
Does anybody want to step in and add anything here before I introduce a variable?
I'd like to add something if I may.
Sure.
And I'm happy to be here. I'm sorry this is the first time I'm joining, but I usually teach on Saturdays, and today I canceled all my lessons because of the snow. So happy to join and meet you all. So I hope nobody takes this the wrong way. But in my opinion, when you attack somebody, whether it's throwing them or hitting them, that's no longer self-defense. If you're the attacker, there has to be, like, self-defense to me is I have no choice but to use whatever I have to survive. If I'm going on the offensive, which you often do in sport, I don't think sport is geared towards self-defense, because there is no designated attacker. My background is jujitsu for sure. I've done a little judo. I won't say I'm a judo practitioner. I'm more an aikidoka than anything. But I do identify as a jujitsu person because judo, jujitsu, and aikido. Judo and aikido all have their roots in jujitsu. So anyway, and I do Filipino martial arts. So and in Filipino martial arts, I know this has nothing to do with Filipino martial arts, but a lot of FMA, they get so mired in the dueling aspect of what they do, they forget to train for self-defense. They forget what self-defense really is anyway. And the higher levels of FMA, you're always attacking. And I used to teach a lot of cops in NYPD. They wouldn't identify themselves. They'd be in my class for like 3 months, 6 months, and I would never know there's a cop in my class. And I took out all knife training. Post 9/11, I had to. I couldn't teach attacking techniques because that's not lawful. So in my opinion, you want to know what self-defense is, ask a cop. I always tell people, I'm like, if you do anything I show you, you're going to end up in jail. It could be a day, it could be a week, it could be for the rest of your life. And I'm very passionate about it because I have a friend, same age, normal person, did FMA, and he's in jail. In fact, he just got out actually, but he went in his 20s, and we were close. But all he was taught was how to kill. He was taught how to target, where to go, and the situation he was in was not self-defense at all, and that's why he went to jail. And I believe there was an instance where a judoka actually threw somebody on the street, and not everybody knows how to fall. And he's used to throwing people that know how to fall, and we all do, but normal people can't. So all it took was one bad fall on the street. I cracked his head open, bled out, and it was manslaughter. And the situation he was in was not self-defense. That's why he went to jail. So when you train for sport, you attack, they attack. There's no clear identity who the attacker is. It's not even it's like you do in Aikido. Aikido and Dori, you're being and you defend. You're not attacking. So it's very clear you're defending yourself. I think all methods of Aikido practice, there's always an attacker. You identify you're being attacked and you respond accordingly. And no disrespect, if somebody was to resist my technique, I would hit them. But I wouldn't attack first. That's the difference. I wouldn't do anything if I wasn't being attacked. But if you're in sport, you have to. No one's going to sit there and watch you just like stand around waiting to be attacked. They want it to be a long fight. That's why they take out all the strikes. Basically, got all the self-defense aspects. And jujitsu, as far as I'm concerned, when I teach it, is always self-defense. There's a clear attacker. And yes, if somebody resists my technique or it comes up in class, I'll give them an option. And usually it's a temi. And if you don't train in a temi, that can be very dangerous because that's the best way to deal with a resisting attacker. And it doesn't have to be the face, doesn't have to be to anywhere vital. FMA, we punch to the limbs. We strike to the limbs. I could do non-lethal techniques all day long to set up a throw, set up a joint lock. I don't have to kill. I can just restrain if I need to. Basically what a cop would do. So, that's always my stance. If a cop can't do it, you can't do it. And cops don't attack people unless they need to restrain someone who's out of order. We're not even cops. We can't just randomly go around and restrain people that we think are a danger to anybody. Maybe it happens and you get away with it, but if you get away with it, you're lucky. You always have to be able to say, I feared for my life before you do anything, before you hit him, before you throw him. Anyway, And I think that's a big difference between any sport, BJJ, judo, and traditional jujitsu, in my opinion, is that in traditional jujitsu, you have a temi, and it's always focused, I believe, on self-defense, not competition, not aggression, not going first. I don't know, but I'll get off. I'll get off the podium.
Okay. I think what you're trying to say is that the difference between most other many martial arts, judo, the competitive martial arts, is that the goal in a competitive martial art is you're both trying to use the same martial art against each other for the purpose of winning a competition.
Right.
With jiu-jitsu and some other martial arts, your goal is to protect yourself from injury, and you do whatever is, we'll use California statutes, whatever is reasonably necessary to protect yourself from further injury and escape the situation, get away from the situation. And if that be I don't know how many of you have been in street situations or had students in street situations. I've said this before. With my students, it's over in 5 or 6 seconds. They've never had to go to the ground. Whereas in any competitive martial art, you may have a time period during, a minute, 2 minutes, or what have you, during which a match is run. And you've got all that time to do what you want to do, assuming, except the other person's trying to win as well. And I think where did Eric go? He's not here, but I do think with judo, there is a tendency to concentrate and perfect a few techniques, because that those techniques are the ones that have a greater chance of winning in a competitive environment. Whereas on the street, you have to deal with the attack. I've had people who have, I've gone into a technique and they've resisted. And the one thing Seki said, you have two choices on the street. You can either fight a person to try to get control of them, or if they want to resist, you go in the direction of their resistance. You help them, and inevitably you will get into a technique that works for you. But it's not something that you thought of ahead of time to do. It's because you've been trained long enough on how to compensate for resistance, which I think is what judo does to some extent. It trains you to compensate for the other person's resistance. And that's also in jiu-jitsu, but as Rich said, your options in jiu-jitsu are far greater than in judo. And you don't have to use quote unquote clean techniques or nice techniques or proved techniques in jiu-jitsu, whereas in judo, you're limited in terms of what you can do because it's a competitive sport.
You can also be mushing. If somebody is behind you and you just see a hand coming, then you have the muscle memory and reactions, and you start mushing and you just execute the technique for your own best.
Right. Yeah. I mean, your mushin comes into play, but one of the things you also still, that hand coming at you from behind, you don't know whether they want to tap you on the shoulder to say, you dropped your wallet or something of that sort, or they're actually coming in to attack you. And so you have to make a split-second judgment as to, okay, this hand is coming at you. Is it a threat or is it not a threat? And that's the hard part of self-defense. And I think, as Rich has said, is making that quick decision. Is, are you being attacked or are you not being attacked? the variable, just to shift gears a little bit, the variable I wanted to get into is there's a variant of judo called combat judo. And I know there are some organizations that will refer to jujitsu as combat judo and the other way around, because it's more, I guess, theoretically oriented towards the street rather than the mat. And I don't know how that concept, you know, we're looking at Kodokan judo versus jiu-jitsu, but is combat judo, is anybody that familiar with combat judo that can give a clear definition of what it is?
Well, in the Philippines, we like most of the grandmasters that of Eskrima that taught jujitsu just called it combat judo because judo was more popular at the time.
Okay,
So it was misnamed on purpose, but they were actually teaching jujitsu and just wanted to get more people into the class, at least in the Philippines. So
that's,
when you hear combat judo in the Philippines, it's actually not judo, it's jujitsu.
yeah, that's what I've always thought. I just didn't know whether there was something else going on that I didn't know. And I've been
Probably
in this
branding.
for 50 cents. Yeah, I just didn't know, is there something else going on here that I've been totally unaware of? And
At least in the Philippines, like, you see kung fu schools here with a karate sign or taekwondo schools with a karate sign, kind of the same thing.
right.
You got Aries right down there. He probably is an expert in Filipino martial arts.
Oh, yeah?
Well, he's from there. Yeah.
Oh, okay, nice.
So I do agree with Rich. There are like Chinese masters who basically learn jujitsu or aikido, and then they call it combat judo. But some would actually learn judo, first done judo, and then just combine it, do it, striking and everything. They call it Hokkaido or combat judo. So yeah.
Probably adding like mano to the judo.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And they just call it combat
Grandmaster
judo.
Ernesto, right? Grandmaster Ernesto Impressive.
It's,
So there's actually in the 70s, right? Quite popular back then. He calls it Hokkaido. It's like a combination of boxing, aikido, and judo. And then later he called it combat aikido.
Can I interject here? Because is anyone picking up like a hum in the background?
Yeah, a little bit.
Yes.
Okay, I don't know. See, if no one talks, it's not there. And I'm trying to.
I'm gonna mute and see if it's me. 'Cause
Pardon?
I have a hand. I'm gonna mute myself and see if it's me because I have a hands free.
But it works with anytime anyone talks, it
Yeah,
pops out. So it doesn't matter who it is. The only thing I can think of is that I've got that maybe there's another. I may have another Zoom meeting going on at the same time and it's feedback, and I don't know how to get rid of that other meeting on this screen.
I'd say mute your microphone. We'll see if it's you.
Pardon?
If you can just mute your microphone, and we'll see if it's you.
Oops. Come on now. Nope.
Gotta love technology. They make it so simple that it becomes complicated.
Right. I just wish there was a way of going to anyway. We'll tough it out.
I do find the combat judo similar to something like combat sambo. It's the same concept. You just added strikes to it.
Mm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, Rich, I wanted to take it a different direction, but I wanted to go back to what you were saying about about self-defense and legal liability. And we had talked about a few months back about that Marine up in New York City that put the homeless guy in a chokehold. Well, I won't say chokehold. He put it in a Dakijima and executed it poorly and killed the guy. He is going to stand trial for manslaughter. His motion to dismiss the charges based on self-defense, and he was defending others, was struck down by the judge. So he's going to trial. I guess the fortunate thing is that he has a great crowdsourcing campaign, so his legal fees are covered. But many years ago, someone told me that, and this was a gun safety class. If you decide to shoot someone, be prepared to spend $10,000, even if you're right, because that's what's going to cost you for a lawyer. And so just make sure that your life is really truly in danger. Back to the judo versus jujitsu. The only thing is I've seen on YouTube were Muay Thai versus Taekwondo. And the Taekwondo practitioner usually gives up because they get tired of getting kicked in the legs. I guess it's the same kind of thing with jujitsu. We practice kind of a control jujitsu. It's not dynamic like the judo, the competitive judo practitioners. And I imagine that if you just took it out to people that are doing judo for self-defense, it's probably very similar to jujitsu without the strikes.
Yeah, I think one of the things, and we've covered this in prior discussions, is that with most competitive martial arts, you know, because there's a referee or whatever you want to call other officials, the competitors are concerned with submitting a person to where they tap out or say mate, or the referee says mate or whatever other term is used. Whereas in a self-defense situation, a lot of the techniques we teach are ultimately designed to cause bodily injury. And in a self-defense situation, your concern cannot be, I want to submit this person till they tap out. Because the person who attacked you doesn't know that they're allowed to do that. And or you may be sensitive to what they're saying, which is ouch, it hurts, all these other verbal clues that they're saying. Or another thing students will do is watch their attacker's face to see if they're in pain. And if they're in pain, they back off. And in a street situation, you can't do these things. Well, you can, but you're going to get beat up. In a street situation, as Rich said, your concern is to protect yourself, to defend yourself. And if that means you have to cause an injury to the other person, that's what happens. But you may have to prove in court that your action was reasonable and necessary, at least in California. And I think that's one of the differences, and it's probably one of the hardest things to get students to understand or accept, that even in a jiu-jitsu class, we teach the students to tap out, to say mate, all these nice things that are done so they can come back next week uninjured, come to the next class uninjured. But the reality is, in a street situation, students have to be oblivious to these things. And if they do the technique correctly, injuries are going to occur anyway. And that's hard. That's very hard for them to recognize and or accept. And but we've been through this part before. So can we come to any conclusion on this topic between judo and jujitsu, or?
I think ultimately, when it comes to the training methodology of judo, it can transfer over to jujitsu. It's really about your inoculating yourself and your students to stress. If you can do that, then your jiu-jitsu will become more. I want to say alive, but I don't think that's the correct term. It's more you're making it more realistic, and you're making it more. You can apply the techniques under stressful conditions. I think that's ultimately what makes something like judo and Brazilian jiu-jitsu more effective. Is you can apply these techniques under a stressful situation.
Well, I'll add. I'm sorry. Like my background is really half FMA. So like in Filipino martial arts, you have standard practice, just like you have jujitsu. You work out your techniques. A lot of people go straight from that to like sparring or fighting, and fail a lot because they don't have intermediary steps that build. I'm going to use Jigaro terminology, fighting attributes. And the old grandmasters, the original ones, had that. It was taken out because it's unsafe. I put it back in because we have padded weapons. We have more. Back then they only had like swords and sticks. So their training weaponry was really non-existent. I use padded weapons, so I can train against fully committed attacks, really aggressive attacks, hard attacks, and not harm anybody. And then they'll put on lacrosse helmets or HEMA gloves, and I'll be able to hit places where they couldn't. So where this is going is the original grandmasters. They were who they were because they had no structure. They weren't taught names of techniques. They weren't taught any kind of. They were just taught from a very early age to deal with chaos and randomness, which is important. And then they went to fighting, but real fighting, like death matches. We can't do that, but I can pad somebody up and tell them, I'm okay with you attacking this with anything you like, and I have no gear, and I have a padded stick, so I get hurt, it's me. So I think the progression, it's important to train, in progression, different drills that build fighting attributes. I don't know which arts have it, which arts don't, but judo does, sure, because I do a little judo. I love that they train their entries repetitively, like for like any kind of throw, they'll just do the entry. They won't do anything else. They'll just do the entry like hundreds of times. That's very useful. The randomness is useful, for sure. And it's hard to do that in jujitsu because there's so many other techniques you're doing before the entry. But I think we can. It's not about like which art is better, because judo is really just a part of jujitsu. I think, and maybe we can take a little bit of what helps judo practitioners build attributes and incorporate it into what we do, because no one's saying we can't. Which I should. I even though like I say I admire that repetitiveness, I don't put it into practice in my classes. It's really more straight jujitsu than anything. But I've seen judoka just do the same entry in kuzushi over and over again. It's fantastic. And I've never seen that in the jujitsu and aikido I practice it. Not like isolating the entry in kuzushi. And I think that's fantastic. It builds that fighting attribute and to like a really fine degree. You get more repetitions.
I think one of the things Because I know Seki was at times heavy on judo, but he also took that concept of repetition and applied it to specific parts of your defensive sequences so that you could establish, you could establish a pattern of action on your part, but then you also learn several different patterns of action. So you're not just saying this is the only way I can go for a hit or things of that sort. And I'm dealing with one person online who's slowly realizing that he needs to slow down. And if he slows down, he can respond to random attacks more effectively. Because he said, I'm trying to think too much. This attack is coming at me. What do I do? And I'll be explaining to him, in a street situation, you do not have time to think, what will I do? You simply do. But I think he's slowly getting the concept, because if he slows down, it's the old Marine saying, slow is smooth is fast. He will eventually be able to do things automatically without thinking. And that's the hard part of self-defense, is to respond without thinking. And I'm gonna, Dave is left for a moment, so Darren has been sitting there paying attention, saying nothing. Darren, want to get some few words in edgewise?
How did I know you were going to throw me out in the street, Sensei? How did I know?
And let's go.
Yeah, look, I'm over here sweating. I'm not joking. I have so much to say about this topic that goes in a million different directions. I'll try to give my best perception of what I've done, and not in my opinion, and some of my opinion does become biased at times, but providing only the facts as I've done the research and working on a project that I've been working on for some time now. So I think the majority of this you'll be able to fact check some of it or all of it if to be able to get to some of what I'm doing. But I'm just going to summarize some of what I believe in hearing some of the comments that were made as it's related to the topic. I'd like to start with first complimenting everybody of their understanding and some of the comments that were made by Eric, Rich, Joni, Aries, and Ernest about their understanding about the entire topic itself. So in part, that all of what they said is significantly accurate in what they're talking about to each one of them's comments that were made. With that said, when you go back, I just want to remind everyone there's, countless styles and systems and training methods and purpose behind what jiu-jitsu is. And then if you take jiu-jitsu and you just break it down, just looking at the spelling alone, each one of those spellings has a designated meaning behind it. And what I mean by meaning is where its lineage is, where the origin is, right? If you take jiu-jitsu and you say J-U-J-U-T-S-U, then that is really the origin of jiu-jitsu. And if you take J-I-U-J-I-T-S-U, then that's an English version, and that kind of comes down to what is today and more modern. And then also even more when you get to J-U-J-I-T-S-U. But each one of those things or ways of spelling has a story behind it, and how the evolution of what jiu-jitsu is and what it has become. All right. And then you take, even going back to the Jigaro Kano days, and he was doing jiu-jitsu. And what is jiu-jitsu? Well, jiu-jitsu is a lot of things, right? It's a little bit of everything. It's not just one specific thing. It's not just judo, right? Judo is a faction of jiu-jitsu. That's where it's come from. That's where it was designed. And why was judo designed? It was in an effort to be able to compete with having people not either significantly injured or have an opportunity to come back, or, even worse, whether, depending on what the need is for the outcome. But when you have these things like Aikido, Judo, Hapkido, and then even when you go further down the food chain, if you will, you have, your BJJ or even your Krav Maga. All of these things really just incorporate the parent art of Jiu-Jitsu. That's what they all are. That's where the origin is. You trace it all the way back. They're all just Jiu-Jitsu techniques. And then really the one thing that we're really kind of forgetting, but if we need to name something, it's not really combat Jiu-Jitsu, it's Aiki Jiu-Jitsu. That's what we're looking at. That's the whole principle behind every one of these other systems and styles and what people like to own. And you have to be able to respect each individual's defense of, holding their ground with what they believe, because if they didn't believe, then they wouldn't train it, and why their system is, if they don't know, goes back to the parent art of being just Jiu-Jitsu. All right, then you take it and you're like, all right, what's the purpose, right? You have sport, you have training, you have reality, and then you have tactical, right? But it's still all Jiu-Jitsu. So what you're trying to do is determine what you need your outcome to be. So in sport, we're really not trying to injure somebody, but we're just trying to compete to win. That's judo, right? That's also BJJ. But it also could be combat sports, right? But in self-defense, you're trying to defend yourself. And then there's multiple topics that come off of that. And, you have to have an understanding of how to be able to execute techniques that you're training to do, what you want the outcome to be, how to defend yourself against unscripted attacks. What if you do defend yourself? What could be the repercussions behind that, whether it's legal or otherwise? There's so many things that come in to be involved in the outcome of something. If you're practicing, it could be randori, or why are you doing randori, or why are you doing repetition and attacks, and some of that Sensei Kirby that alluded to, being able to perform repetition and unscripted attacks, or to be able to defend yourself effectively in a real life situation, because you want to be able to respond, to have it be second nature, right? You don't want to have to think about it. You don't want to have to do that, which also leads to another topic that you don't get touched on, and Mushin, but then you also have Zanshin and Fudoshin behind it, right? So you have all of these other things that can also become something. But when you narrow it all down, there's not a technique in Jiu-Jitsu that is not designed to cause injury, period. I mean, yeah, in a classroom environment, we understand what's happening. We're conditioned to fall and take the fall, and how to submit, understand the gray area between give and take, so we're not injuring each other. In the street, that individual doesn't know those things. They don't know how to fall. They're certainly not conditioned to take a fall or a throw, and that's unfortunate for some of the outcome, even if you have to defend yourself in a real life situation. So really, it kind of goes down to the individual, who you are as a person, understanding the dynamics of that specific situation. What are you going to do someone? Because no matter what, in a sporting environment, they're allowed to tap. There's a referee that can stop, call, stop, mate, whatever you want to say to the whole event. In real life, you may not have that opportunity. And so it's on the individual's moral beliefs, what their integrity is, with their experience and their training, and what the outcome can be. And a lot of times, unfortunately, they don't understand it enough at a higher level to know the outcome of what those scenarios can lead to, which also gets them in trouble. And then they try to defend it, but sometimes it may be warranted. And then if you look at where it might be warranted, that might be in a tactical situation, right? Whether it's your life, that your life is on the line no matter what. That could be like a war type scenario. You know that if you're not defending yourself, to be able to terminate the situation, that your own life can be terminated. So then you have all of those things that you need to be thinking about. But understanding your spot, sport, real life, and even real life is different than tactical. is a broad range of understanding what you should be doing, what the outcome of the techniques that you're doing can be, and understanding what those techniques are designed to do and how they can impact another individual when you're performing them. And then look, just to kind of wrap it up a little bit, when you're in a classroom environment or sporting environment, people understand what you're trying to do. It makes it way more difficult to execute techniques against someone who understands what you're trying to do. Versus, and the reason why I'm saying that, because if you take a black belt, for example, and you take a purple belt, okay, so an intermediate level type experience, that purple belt still could defend themselves against a black belt when they understand what the black belt is trying to do to them. Will they still get thrown? Possibly, likely, but they could still defend themselves. And then if they can't, they're conditioned to be able to continue to train more. In real life, it's way easier to execute technique when someone has no clue what you're trying to do to them and how these techniques that we do in jiu-jitsu are extremely effective and what the outcome of these things can be, whether it's from choking someone out to having and not understanding how long you're supposed to be able to apply that choke when someone does pass out, whether you're doing when you're cutting off the air flow to someone and then they become start to fight because they can't breathe. Imagine if you're drowning, right? I'm sure everybody understands the concept. If you're drowning, there's someone that tends to fight you way more than if they don't know or understand that the blood flows cut off to the brain. They're eventually going to pass out. There's no fight there, right? And it's those things. But when people don't understand what's happening to them, then the person who's performing the techniques, depending on their experience level and their understanding of what they can do and what the outcome of those things can do, it's up to the integrity of that individual. And a lot of times, even those individuals are not experienced enough to know what the true outcome can result in. Then you have these other things. I don't know. I may have led us down to a lot of other things. There's a lot of other avenues here. I have like 5 pages of notes that I've already wrote down just in the conversation that we had. I was hoping to try to summarize that a little bit, bring it all together. This thing goes a lot of different places, but ultimately, to bring it in together one more time, all of these things are jiu-jitsu. They are the origin of everything that we're doing is jiu-jitsu, and then understanding what the purpose of it is: sport, training, reality, execution, or tactical.
I have one. I think that was right. Was what Darren said. I totally agree on everything. I have one thing to add. So that is that we have to remember jiu-jitsu is trained so that you can empty-handed even handle a guy with a weapon. So you have to be able to execute the technique without getting hurt yourself with a guy who have a weapon. That's also one of the philosophies behind Jiu-Jitsu and karate.
Yeah, that's definitely something that Aikido addresses all the time. And traditional Jiu-Jitsu does that. Judo does because it's a sport. There can't be multiple attackers. There can't be weapons in play. And then I'm from New York. I've known some bad people, and I've been in rooms where people talked about things that they actually did to people. Not friends of mine, friends of other people, all gangs. And I always tell people, I'm like, you want the worst case scenario, train for. It's multiple attackers. And you for sure know that's always happening because there's a gang presence almost in every state. Even no matter how safe you think you are. If there's drugs in your state, there are gangs. And gangs do not fight fair, fight with weapons. They come at least 3 to 4 people at a time. And they want to make it quick and they want to get out. So, I mean, one of the questions I think was comparing judo versus jiu-jitsu and why, and forgive me, I don't know any other instance except for like where judo and jujitsu were both up for bid to train the Tokyo police, and judo won. I mean, I think everyone here knows that the person who won was trained in Aikijutsu, not a true judo practitioner anyway. But you had, you know, if, and I'm sure there were instances where traditional jujitsu people were in a challenge with judo practitioners, and maybe they lost. But what were the circumstances? Did they forbid strikes? Did they, you know, what were the limitations? If you place limitations on jujitsu, that judo or anything is, you really want to see effectiveness of jujitsu versus anything, there has to be no limitation. Traditional jujitsu has no limit. We use weapons. We train against weapons. And what is it better for? Even if you prove like one guy who's very well trained in judo can beat a traditional jujitsu person, what does that really prove? That doesn't mean that the judo person can fight in a street. That doesn't mean he's better at street fighting than the jujitsu person. I guarantee you, at least my guess, if you took a poll of people that have actually fought in the street and survived, it probably more jujitsu people than judo people, because it's always multiple attackers and there's always weapons.
Rich, you're making a valid point. I mean, again, you're talking about sport versus reality. I mean, that's
Right,
just
exactly
what it is. If you're in a sporting environment, that judo person, if you put a jiu-jitsu person, a very aligned jiu-jitsu person who's used to be able to defend themselves in a real life scenario, whether it's self-defense, otherwise, tactical, whatever it might be, in a judo sporting event, they may get thrown all day. That judo practitioner, they only know 3 techniques. That's all they work on 100% of the time, every single day. He may be able to throw that guy. But if you open up the street, that means you take all of the jiu-jitsu techniques, not just a piece of the jiu-jitsu techniques, what you call judo. And if you're not just picking on judo, you're saying BJJ. If you just take a fraction of jiu-jitsu and you're like, okay, Mr. Jiu-Jitsu guy, go compete in this judo event or go compete in this BJJ event. They might lose. There's some good practitioners in there. There's some good athletes that can perform those techniques. That's what they're designed to do in a sporting environment. But if you put that judo person or that BJJ person, quote unquote, which is all jiu-jitsu, in the street, and you're like, all right, Mr. Street Jiu-Jitsu guy, Mr. Traditional, Mr. Jiu-Jitsu guy himself, now defend yourself against this Olympian world champion judoka, or this world champion BJJ person, it won't even be close. If the experience levels are the same, it won't even be close because the rules are no longer applied. And that jiu-jitsu person is going to use whatever it is in an effort to be able to defend themselves, to be able to self-preserve their own health and safety. That's just a fact. And a lot of people don't agree with that, but the fact of the matter is the rest of them are just sport.
Darren, Darren and Rich, you made a, sorry, Sensei, go ahead, please.
Dave has been sitting here patiently for the past hour, hasn't said a word. And I don't know whether you're chomping at the bit or just taking it all in. So can
I was
a thought?
I was taking it in. It's interesting to me that that we've spent this amount of time making these points. I just drawing an analogy. If you want to draw what is a straight analogy, I can do it with the field of piano instruction. Piano instruction is done and taught traditionally one way. And in the real world, piano is played 3 ways. So when I started teaching, I had to ask myself, do I want to teach traditionally or do I want to teach all the ways the piano is played? Industry came down on me. Said, you don't do it that way. They wanted to tar and feather me and run me out of town. But the clients that I had loved it. I doubled my clientele in 6 months and had a waiting list ever since. And it's been that way for 50 years. Point I'm making is that if you take a person who's traditionally trained in piano, they can't improvise, they can't write music, they can't do old time rock and roll. They can't do jazz. There's a plethora of things they can't do. They can sit down and regurgitate somebody else's musical thought, period. And somebody's exposed to all the ways that piano's played, by note, by chord symbol, by ear. They learn everything from music composition, how to listen to something and play it back, how to take a style and mix with another style. So you end up with these beautiful amalgamations of music. Now, which one's a more complete musician? The one who just learned to regurgitate somebody else's musical thought and doesn't think music for themselves, or the person who's able to understand the broad? Perfect analogy, jujitsu, wide open. The only rule is survive. So when I find myself in a situation where they show me lyrics and a chord symbol, I can sit there and jump on a piano and make it happen. Whereas the traditionally trained person goes, where's my notes? There are no notes here. I can't read this. What am I supposed to do? Well, so the analogy here is that when you study traditionally, which would be equivalent to studying one aspect of one aspect of jiu-jitsu, you have the rule of we do it this way and everything else is wrong. They actually call it, when you regurgitate other people's music playing just by note, studying traditionally, they actually call it playing legit, as if everything else is illegitimate. It's an interesting form of snobbery in the music industry, and it's still there today. So the point I'm making is I'm sitting here drinking all this in, and I'm thinking just 5 minutes ago that this is a valid analogy. What does it mean to me personally? Well, it's what draws me to jiu-jitsu from karate. Karate was what was limiting. If I was going to use karate, I was going to have to hurt somebody. With jiu-jitsu, I can use jiu-jitsu and I can modulate my response. I have many more options. And why did I universalize with my piano study after spending just 9 years doing traditional only? Because I saw there was a whole universe out there that I had not enjoyed experiencing. Same old instrument, whole different way to do it. So I enjoyed learning how to play by ear, learning how to play by chord symbol, learning how to improvise, jazz, old time rock and roll, ragtime, Dixieland. I mean, all of it. I heard something and I couldn't do it. I went home, found a way to make it happen. Then my students, benefit. So that's all that came to mind. And 10 minutes ago, if you'd asked me, I wouldn't have had that answer. It just occurred to me. Now, I don't know if that made sense. Yeah, I don't know if anybody grasped that because I might be the only musician here today. But anyways,
Made that true.
thanks for giving me a soapbox. I think it just collapsed and I'm back down on the ground.
I think one of the important, other than the concept Dave has mentioned, which I think it's the realistic and true, is that you mentioned one of the advantages of jiu-jitsu is the ability to modulate or control what you're doing. And having been in numerous situations, that ability to modulate or control what you were doing, rather than with karate, all you can do is hit or kick. And your intention in karate is to hit and kick with sufficient force to injure the person, I would think. And in judo, the goal is to pin and choke them out or get them to submit. I know that in a street situation, you have to be able to modulate what you are doing. All you may need to do is control the person. You may not need to injure them. But that's a hard decision to make at the time. But in certain situations, you can do in certain situations, you can make that decision. And I've had people say, you're hurting me, stop hurting me. And I simply say, well, stop moving. And if you stop moving, it'll stop hurting. And surprisingly, once in a while, their brain cells click and they stop moving, and then you can, verbally calm them down. Sometimes that doesn't, sometimes you do have to bring them to the ground. That's what, law enforcement, their intent is to control the person, not to injure them. Although sometimes that's, to the unseen eye, that's not what's happening. And to the unseen eye, the officer looks like the aggressor, even though by law he's allowed to do what he's doing within certain guidelines, confines. I've seen some videos of police officers where they do a fantastic job, and I've seen some videos where that officer is going to get fired. It's because they're just so out of the realm of controlling the person. And I think that's one of the advantages that jiu-jitsu has, is that when you are sufficiently trained, you have the ability at times to, judgmentally decide how far you're going to go with this technique, how far is necessary to get what you want out of the technique. And that's and you can't give how do you say it? You cannot say, in this situation, you will. Because as Darren has said, as Richard said, everybody said, they said, the street situation is completely unpredictable. And all you can do as a jiu-jitsu practitioner is attempt to control the situation. Now, if that means injuring your attacker, that's what happens. If it means putting him in a control hold, that's what happens. Okay, but even all control holds can injure the attacker if necessary. And to me, that's the advantage, is it gives you more control of the situation, even though at the time you don't know what you're going to do ahead of time, because you really react or respond to the attack.
I'd say because jiu-jitsu affords us a broader range of responses, and the unpredictability of the street, our response is also harder to predict, because we have much more to draw from. And so we become unpredictable, which is a better match for the unpredictability of the street.
Right. Well, that's why I tell my students, one of the jiu-jitsu has a strength and it has a disadvantage. The disadvantage is there's so much more to learn. That's why it takes longer to get up to black belt or what have you. The advantage of jiu-jitsu on the street is that nobody knows what you're going to do, not even you. And that's its strength, because you can't predict what's going to happen.
There's also one thing, knowing you can the martial art of jiu-jitsu, then are you the one who's gonna step up in a group and defend the group, or do you back out?
That's a good question. It depends. If it's your child or something like that, yeah, you do have the right to defend them. I don't think,
I don't know if there's a true answer to that question.
yeah, I agree.
Scenario based.
There's no simple answer. If you're in a group and you see someone's going to physically attack another person, depending on your skill level, you may want to intercede and put that person in a control hold or take them down or something. and that may be legitimate, but to haul off and do something that may injure them or be seen as a more aggressive move may not be acceptable or allowed in, in a court of law. You, as Darren said, you can't predict this ahead of time. All you can do is do what you think is best and be able to explain your action afterwards, and that's the key. And as I said before, that's why sometimes, although law enforcement would love to, do other paperwork and get that what happened, et cetera, yada, 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 and get the paperwork done, sometimes you need to take a step back and figure out what happened and what you did so that you don't say something wrong. Because once it's written down, it's harder to counter it. And that's the hard part is, for lack of a better phrase, keeping your mouth shut until you've had a chance to clear what happened up in your mind. Because many people want to say, well, I just, well, he was going to swing at the person, so I just blocked his arm and took him down to forward shoulder lock, and he broke his nose. You didn't break his nose. He did.
Gravity did.
And, if you had said, and I broke his nose, okay, that could be interpreted as that you physically broke his nose. If you say he broke his nose, and they say, well, how did he break his nose? Well, he didn't know how to fall or how to land. I mean, it's many times it's how do you say this? And this, you're not lying, but it's how you explain yourself that can sometimes keep you out of trouble. That's why you need to be able to step back and figure out what actually happened. Because no, you did not break his nose. If he had turned his head sideways, he might not have broken his nose. If his nose was smaller, he might have broken his teeth. I mean, which is more expensive. You don't know. That's why you need to be able to figure out what happened and be able to say it in a way that is accurate from your perception. I mean, you don't want to be misleading, because that will get you in trouble too. But you want an accurate statement, like, going back to saying, he said, you always help your attacker go in the direction he wants to go. And that's absolutely true in Aikido. It's true, it should be true in Jiu-Jitsu. I've always followed that philosophy, and I accept it. It's hard for some people to accept. You help the person because they're sick and they need help, so you help them. Is it a warped mindset? I don't know. I've never had to explain it, my actions that way. But
Say, if I may just comment on what Eric and Darren and Rich said a while ago. Eric mentioned that the superiority of judo is the training, which is repetition. But basically, sensei, the traditional or the koryu, the Japanese koryu, they are known for repetitions. Sometimes we do train in the keiko that they do, just one technique for 1 hour, just repetitions. So judo did not do that really. The other myth that happened was that the randori, the live training that they did. But before judo, there was this Taken Ryu, Seki Ryu, and other martial arts, Jiu-Jitsu, that has randori as well. In fact, Aikido, they have Jiwaza. So it depends on basically on what they do as well. It's depends on the school and the teacher. And the good thing about what Rich and Darren said is that um, in the sports, you are limited on what you can do because you're basically being told what you cannot do or what you can do. And the good thing about that is that the Europeans and the Americans, they have the catch wrestling. And before it became a Olympic wrestling, slaps are allowed. And it's hard to get when you're doing wrestling with slaps. It's hard. And now BJJ, they actually have slap BJJ. They call it now combat jiu-jitsu.
Back to
And
jiu-jitsu.
then the funny thing is, like what Darren was saying, they were on the ground that they're being slapped, and some people are getting knocked out
Oh wow.
because they're not prepared to do those things.
Back in the 60s, early 70s, Seki would actually have jujitsu tournaments. And the only rule was no attacks to the face. Or, high injury rate. And back at that time in history, there's no such thing as, martial arts sensei didn't have to worry about insurance or liability. The courts basically felt that, well, if you're stupid enough to go into a martial arts class and get injured, that's your learning experience. And the world doesn't turn that way long. But Seki was contradictions because he'd always say, which I always followed, and he did get upset with me even when I went into some of those competitions. He said one of his rules was, if you know a hold is set properly, tap out. It's not worth the injury. Because in his competitions, he would allow you to tap out. And if I knew a hold was set properly, I tapped out. And so I never got injured in one of the few tournaments I entered into, but he would get upset with me for tapping out. Sometimes you can't win. But how do you say he would allow us even in class to do some randori, but he'd say, I want you to move a little slower than you normally would, so that if you get into a situation where you're going to be locked up or to be thrown, you can find, just say mate for a moment, and then you're allowed to see if you can figure your way out of that situation. But he would reserve that only for maybe brown and black belts. Because you needed to have enough of a technical base so that you could move relatively quickly out of a hold that wasn't necessarily set properly. Because again, once a hold is set and you try and get out, that's where the injuries occur. Or if you set up a basic hand throw and you execute it before the person can compensate for it by falling into it or something else, their wrist is going to be broken before they hit the ground. Their wrist doesn't get broken once they hit the ground. Once they hit the ground, they may dislocate or fracture their shoulder, get a concussion, or broken ribs, all these other secondary injuries. But if you do your technique correctly, it will work before the person hits the ground. Because
so I think that kind of goes back to some of the things that I was trying to allude to in some of the comments is every technique that we do is designed to cause injury. Every technique.
Right.
I mean, if you just start with a choke and you do it to the most humane way, eventually you either have someone that's trying to, if they understand sporting environment, even in a real life scenario, they're tapping out, right? But in real life, do you let them go? I guess it depends on the individual that's applying the technique, the situation that they're in, and every other factor that may apply. But eventually they're going to pass out. Now, does the person that's applying that particular technique understand what happens beyond it? Holding that technique, once somebody passes out for 3, 5 more seconds, and you start to cause brain damage, right? And then you let go, and then you have a permanent result of that. If you hold on to it past that 3 to 5 additional seconds, then you have a chance of actually terminating somebody, right? They don't never come back from that. And so that's the most humane, even though in law enforcement, and I don't know why, because it's one of the only effective techniques, if not the only effective technique that you can really do something against that's under the influence of something like a PCP or something like that, is a choke, a carotid restraint. Then and you take that away from law enforcement officials. I don't know that, in my opinion, I don't know that that's the best thing to do, when that's one of the only things, if not the only thing, that actually works. But what you should be doing is the law enforcement agencies should be focusing on educating those people to be able to use that, because that is the most humane way to be able to defend themselves and restrain those type of situations. But if you go to a wrist lock or a joint lock, or whether it's on the wrist, on the leg, on the arm, whatever, some of those things are not designed for restraint. You actually have to do damage, whether it's a sprain, if you will, or worse, if it's a break. And so those things escalate as well. I mean, there's injury there. It's son. If you do a throw, if you look at what we do in falls, we're trained, we're conditioned to learn how to fall out of the technique. We fall a certain way. We have break falls. We try to take the impact of that fall and not have it absorbed into one spot. So we make it all, we put it out throughout the rest of the body. We slap out of it. We tuck our chin. Our head's not hitting the ground. But if you pause that throw and you see where it's actually designed to end up, it's never on the back. If you do a shoulder throw, if you do a hip throw, if you do a tight touch on the ankle, a drop throw, whatever, those things are not designed to look like this pretty flowering art. People are falling. When you throw somebody in real life, they're falling directly on their face. You're doing significant damage to the body. Don't forget, we fall on mats in class. You take the softest surface that's out in real life in grass, that's not a good or a positive result. You could do spinal injury, where someone could be significantly injured there. That's after the fact that somebody may have a broken nose, lacerated face, busted open forehead or head injury, or loss of teeth, mouth, whatever it might be. Like, that's the reality behind jiu-jitsu. The reality behind jiu-jitsu is not a classroom or a sporting environment. If you're actually trying to use those techniques, they're all designed to cause injury. There is no buts.
Yeah, and I mean, my opinion is you have to be ready to do that, and then you have to be ready for the consequence. And I don't think people really, I don't know, I could be wrong, but I've been trained only by my brother, but then when he wasn't around, I would go to other martial arts schools so I could fight. And in all the other schools I've ever gone to, they never ever talked about what would happen afterwards. Court.
That is true, Rick.
They never said, this is going to get you in trouble. I never heard someone teach something and say, never do this. I do all the time. Almost every other class, I'm saying, you cannot do any of what I just taught you unless your life is on the line. And then please,
You started out with that, Rich, and really, I've been in a lot of dojos. I've been in a lot of gyms. I've been in a lot of training scenarios, clinics, seminars, internationally, all over the place. And really, it's very rare. I've heard Sensei Kirby, and I've heard Sensei Jack, who is my two primary sensei that are out there that I've been with for countless years, and they are very adamant about preserving the safety of the individual when you have the need to be able to perform these techniques. In the majority of every other place that I've gone, it's very rare that you hear someone express that concern for what the result may be and then what you may have to be accountable behind it. It's
Right.
extremely rare, and it's unfortunate, and that's a big part of the education that's missed. You know, I would give all due respect and recognition to Sensei Kirby, who's here, and Sensei Jack, who's not, but they have been at the forefront of being able to pass that along for years. But you're right, it needs more of it and a better understanding in the martial arts community.
Gentlemen, on this topic, in today's news feed, there is an MMA fighter, professional MMA fighter from Ireland, who is permanently disabled, has no feeling in his legs, massive spinal injury, and is no longer an MMA fighter as a result of an injury. I can't tell you any more specifics than that, but I know it came out in today's news feed. This person is toast. He's done physically, and maimed, paralyzed.
Yeah, I mean, me personally, the thing I don't like about any kind of combat sport is like seeing people get hurt or hurting people and then rejoicing about it, like really like getting off on it. And you know, it's just like I'm an Aikidoka by philosophy. I hope never to hurt anybody. And if I do, I'm gonna have to deal with that on my conscience. But I have to be able to explain it to the law, but also to myself, like, why did I do this? And it's never going to be because I wanted to do it, ever. Because I would never want to hurt somebody. I don't think I could live with it. I've hurt people before, you know, accidentally or, you know, and I never felt good about it, ever. It's not something and I think when you train sport, unfortunately, you get so used to winning and hurting people, and then joy over it. It pollutes your soul. And I don't think you could ever go into a courtroom and like fool anybody into thinking that you're remorseful when you're not. But if you are truly remorseful for what damage you've done, it will come out for sure. But like, you know, that's why I just don't. I'm not for it. You know,
It's a split second, the self-decision when it starts. It's a split second. You do what you can, and then it's over. And it then starts the other process.
Right. Yeah, but what in sport, you're really going in there to cause harm. And then, you know, and if it results in major injury like paralysis, how do you live with yourself? And because that's not something that happens to happen. I mean, like in Chinese martial arts, they make that sign, right? That's aggression, that's controlling aggression, right? But would you make that sign and then go into like a duel? You're not controlling aggression. Anytime you go into a sport, I tell people, you're creating aggression. You're creating conflict where it didn't exist. I don't. Now we're going down to philosophy. Philosophical.
So I don't think anybody intentionally wants to hurt anybody. It's just the thing. If attacked, I'm talking about a street situation, not
sure.
Fight in an arena, because I don't like to fight in an arena. I wouldn't put myself in danger where I could get hurt. So, but in a street situation, I would say it's a split second. You do what you have to do, and then you just have to hope for the best after that.
Right, because and you do what you have to do to survive. If that results in their injury, they brought that up on themselves. You know, that's something they like. It's they're putting your life on the line. It's not. I have children, so I don't even think of it as just my life. It would ruin all my entire family's life if I were to be harmed or worse, killed. That would be it for their future. So I'm not only just defending myself, I'm defending my family at the same time, and I will do whatever I have to. Anyway.
Okay, I think we've worn the judo versus jiu-jitsu subject down. And we also touched on some other issues. And we've spent a good hour and a half on this. So I think we'll conclude with this. This will be one of those unique discussions where we're only dealing with one topic. And but it was a lengthy topic. I want to compliment all of you. We really stuck to the subject, and even though we went off in some different tangents, we brought it back and had some good insight from Dave and Darren. And we will see you again in 2 weeks. Well, not 2 weeks. First Saturday in February. And in the interim, I hope I'll find out where this microphone interference is coming from. And maybe I'll be able to clear it up in the final production of this meeting. Anyway, so I want to wish you a great weekend. And Richard, I hope the snow doesn't get more than 6 or 8 feet high.
Yeah, we only got 3 inches.
Yeah, we're supposed to have some rain significant rain on Monday morning, but Southern California, if you have a drizzle, it's referred to as a storm. And
Right now, it's raining in the valley, so
it's raining in the valley.
Oh
All right.
And but Southern California has no concept of what rain or snow is really.
yeah. You're lucky.
until it happens, and then nobody knows how to drive.
Right, nobody knows how to drive. God forbid we should have snow in Southern California. There aren't enough snow changes around.
We had snow last year, and people were freaking out.
Oh yeah. No salt to salt the roads.
Eric, at least you know how to drive when it's dry. We don't know how to drive in general in the South, and then it snows and it just gets worse.
Yes. So have a great weekend, and I'm very happy with the turnout today. Rich, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Aris, thank you for joining us.
Thanks, I'm saying.
Joni, thank you for joining us. We have good international meet today, and we'll see you again on the first Saturday.